Nutrition science and everyday application. Types of research studies and how to interpret them. The field of nutrition is dynamic, and our understanding and practices are always evolving. Nutrition scientists are continuously conducting new research and publishing their findings in peer-reviewed journals. This adds to scientific knowledge, but it's also of great interest to the public. So nutrition research often shows up in the news and other media sources. You might be interested in nutrition research to inform your own eating habits, or if you work in a health profession so that you can give evidence-based advice to others. Making sense of science requires that you understand the types of research studies used and their limitations. The hierarchy of nutrition evidence. Researchers use many different types of study designs depending on the question they are trying to answer, as well as factors such as time, funding, and ethical considerations. The study design affects how we interpret the results and the strength of the evidence as it relates to real-life nutrition decisions. It can be helpful to think about the types of studies within a pyramid representing a hierarchy of evidence, where the studies at the bottom of the pyramid usually give us the weakest evidence with the least relevance to real-life nutrition decisions, and the studies at the top offer the strongest evidence with the most relevance to real-life nutrition decisions. The hierarchy of evidence shows types of research studies relative to their strength of evidence and relevance to real-life nutrition decisions, with the strongest studies at the top and the weakest at the bottom. The pyramid also represents a few other general ideas. There tends to be more studies published using the methods at the bottom of the pyramid because they require less time, money, and other resources. When researchers want to test a new hypothesis, they often start with the study designs at the bottom of the pyramid, such as in vitro, animal, or observational studies. Interventional studies are more expensive and resource intensive, so there are fewer of these types of studies conducted. But they also give us higher quality evidence, so they're an important next step if observational and non-human studies have shown promising results. Meta-analysis and systemic reviews combine the results of many studies already conducted, so they help researchers summarize scientific knowledge on a topic. Non-human studies, in vitro studies. The simplest form of nutrition research is an in vitro study, and in vitro means within glass, although plastic is used more commonly today. With these, experiments are conducted within flasks, dishes, plates, and test tubes. These studies are performed in isolated cells or tissue samples, so they're less expensive and time-intensive than animal or human studies. In vitro studies are vital for zooming in on biological mechanisms to see how things work at the cellular or molecular level. However, these studies shouldn't be used to draw conclusions about how things work in humans or even animals, because we can't assume that the results will apply to a whole living organism. Animal studies are one form of in vivo research, which translates to within the living. Rats and mice are the most common animals used in nutrition research. Animals are often used in research that would be unethical to conduct in humans. Another advantage of animal dietary studies is that researchers can control exactly what the animals eat. In human studies, researchers can tell subjects what to eat and even provide them with the food, but they may not stick to the planned diet. People are also not very good at estimating, recording, or reporting what they eat and in what quantities. In addition, animal studies typically do not cost as much as human studies. There are some important limitations of animal research. First, an animal's metabolism and physiology are different from humans. Plus, animal models of disease, such as cancer, cardiovascular disease, although similar, are different from human diseases. Animal research is considered preliminary, and while it can be very important to the process of building scientific understanding and informing the types of studies that should be conducted in humans, animal studies shouldn't be considered relevant to real-life decisions about how people eat. Observational studies. Observational studies in human nutrition collect information on people's dietary patterns or nutrient intake and look for associations with health outcomes. Observational studies do not give participants a treatment or intervention. Instead, they look at what they're already doing and see how it relates to their health. These types of study designs can only identify correlations or relationships between nutrition and health. They can't show that one factor causes another. For that, we need intervention studies, which we'll discuss in a moment. Observational studies that describe factors correlated with human health are also called epidemiological studies. One example of a nutrition hypothesis that has been investigated using observational studies is that eating a Mediterranean diet reduces the risk of developing cardiovascular disease. A Mediterranean diet focuses on whole grains, fruits and vegetables, beans and other legumes, nuts, olive oil, herbs, and spices. It includes small amounts of animal protein, mostly fish, dairy, and red wine. There are 3 main types of observational studies, all of which can be used to test hypotheses about the Mediterranean diet. Cohort studies. Cohort studies follow a group of people or a cohort over time, measuring factors such as diet and health outcomes. A cohort study of the Mediterranean diet would ask a group of people to describe their diet, and then researchers would track them over time to see if those eating a Mediterranean diet had a lower incidence of cardiovascular disease. Case control studies compare a group of cases and controls looking for differences between the 2 groups that might explain their different health outcomes. For example, researchers might compare a group of people with cardiovascular disease with a group of healthy controls to see whether there were more controls or cases that followed a Mediterranean diet. Cross-sectional studies collect information about a population of people at one point in time. For example, a cross-sectional study might compare the dietary patterns of people from different countries to see if diet correlates with the prevalence of cardiovascular disease in the different countries. Prospective cohort studies, which enroll a cohort and follow them into the future, are usually considered the strongest type of observational study design. Retrospective studies look at what happened in the past, and they're considered weaker because they rely on people's memory of what they ate or how they felt in the past. There are several well-known examples of prospective cohort studies that have described important correlations between diet and disease. The Framingham Heart Study to identify risk factors for heart disease, the Health Professionals Follow-up Study, and the Nurses' Health Studies. Observational studies have the advantage of allowing researchers to study large groups of people in the real world, looking at the frequency and pattern of health outcomes and identifying factors that correlate with them. But even very large observational studies may not apply to the population as a whole. We've already mentioned another important limitation of observational studies, that they can only determine correlation, not causation. A prospective cohort study that finds that people eating a Mediterranean diet have a lower incidence of heart disease can only show that the Mediterranean diet is correlated with lower risk of heart disease. It can't show that the Mediterranean diet directly prevents heart disease. Why? There are a huge number of factors that determine health outcomes, such as heart disease, and other factors might explain a correlation found in observational study. For example, people who eat a Mediterranean diet might also have the same kind of people who exercise more, sleep more, have higher income, or be less stressed. These are called confounding factors. They're factors that can also affect the outcome in question, such as heart disease, and also vary with the factors being studied, such as the Mediterranean diet.